All right, so welcome to our cover to cover How to Write and Share Your Story workshop. Really excited that you all are here, especially as we are doing this in the beginning of 2023, because I know many of us like to be able to set our goals for every new year. So if you have that goal of writing your book, there's plenty of time to do that because we are just in the beginning of January. So plenty of time to become an author yet this year. And so that's really what I want to be able to do in this workshop is give you the tools, the strategies, the inspiration, the motivation to write your book, to find it is that will drive you from the beginning to the end of completing your manuscript. So who am I? I'm Lauren Eckhart. I'm the CEO and founder of Burning Soul Collective. I'm also an award-winning and best-selling author, ghostwriter, and book coach. I wear a lot of hats because y'all, this is my passion. I've known since I was 6 years old I want to be a writer, but I took a very long path journey to get to this point because I faced a lot of that imposter syndrome, self-doubt, put a lot of things in my life ahead of my author dreams, even though it was planted there since I was 6 years old. I've been the biggest book lover my entire life. They're my favorite things in the world. To this day, anytime I move, like 60% of my stuff, books. The first thing I open up when I get into a new place, my books. Y'all, they just make me happy. And as I've gone through life, I've really learned more and more that a big part of my purpose here is to help people write books that are going to help inspire and empower other people. I really believe that we are all on these incredible life journeys that are teaching us things throughout, and they're so unique to each one of us. And then combined with our own experiences, thoughts, feelings, perspectives, our skills, our talents, we were all given different gifts and different insights for a reason. And there's so much beauty that comes when we are all able to come together and share those things, right? Truly as a community to help each other. And so that is why I created the company that I did. Originally, it was called Burning Soul Press because we were really focused on the publishing aspect. Earlier last year, we ended up changing the name to Burning Soul Collective. Burning Soul Press is still our publishing imprint, but I really wanted it to be more of that collective community, which is our goal, building the biggest community possible of soul-driven writers, those who are truly doing it because they feel like it's part of their purpose in some way to share their message, their story with the world. So I am here to really just help light that fire for people, provide them with the guidance, the insight, the tools, the strategies that they need to be able to do it because it can feel very much like you're scaling a mountain, or there's a lot to work through. People start off thinking, oh, I should write a book someday, but there's a reason why a lot of people don't actually complete it. When you sit down to do it, you realize how hard it can actually be. So my goal is to try to make it as easy as possible with people. And really, it's just being there as a support and guiding them and encouraging them and letting them know they're not alone in a lot of what they're feeling and experiencing as they're going through this endeavor. So, we will talk a little bit about what switched or changed for me. Why why suddenly this became such a big part of my life, because I really want to encourage you guys to find whatever it is that you have this message, right? This book idea for a reason, and to find whatever anchor will drive you to complete it, because that is really the key in a lot of ways. So our agenda for today, we're going to talk about your why and the theme of your book. We're going to choose your target person. This is something I'm really big in, and you hear a lot about target audience, but I'm a big believer in target person. We're going to talk about different ways you can structure your book. We're going to go through my favorite exercise, which has helped a lot of my clients have the breakthroughs that they need and the stories that they want to be able to share. We're going to talk about planning and plotting of your book, goal setting and time management, so you can walk away with a solid plan on how to finish your book. And then we're going to talk about what that journey actually looks like when you become an author, including publishing and promotion insight. So I want you to first take a moment to visualize your future book. Now, there might be multiple on your heart, multiple ideas that you're thinking about. I really want you to spend this workshop thinking about one specifically. And I get the question a lot, like, if I have a lot of ideas, how do I pick just one? And I always say, go back to the idea that, if you just knew that this was going to be the only book you had the opportunity to write, what would you want that book to be? Because a book will outlast your time here in this world. That is the crazy part. A book will completely outlast your time here in this world. So it's going to be a reflection of you, your message, your life. What do you want that to stand for? Pick that book. And then I also say, always pick the book that will make you the most excited to go from the beginning to the end, right? The one that gets you lit up. And a lot of times for many of us, many of the people we tend to attract in our program specifically, you all are wanting to make a positive impact in this world. And so part of that is you really need to be able to latch on to what this book will be able to do for other people. And that will be part of what drives you forward, what gets you excited to actually complete it. So think about that book. And what elements of it do you see? Is it the cover? Are you imagining the stories within? Are you seeing the people holding your book? Are you seeing it in a bookstore? Are you seeing articles about it or just the opportunity to share it? Are you seeing it as a gift that you can give your clients? Are you seeing it as a gift you can give your family at Christmas next year? Do you see certain words, certain elements of your storytelling? It's so important to really start to see it, because the more you can bring it into your reality before it's written, it's going to drive you even more to get to that point of completing it. So this is a big element of what I teach and preach in a lot of ways when I work with my clients, is really knowing the why that drives you. And I use this as an example. Like I said earlier, I have known since I was 6 years old that I wanted to be an author. I loved books. I loved writing. I loved the way it made me feel. I was winning all these like writing contests when I was younger. It was my outlet in a lot of ways. I went into songwriting for a while. I mean, it was just such a big part of my life. And I knew ultimately what I wanted to do was write a book. And I had written small little books, right? But nothing I ever tried to get published. And there was always a reason. There's always something holding me back. There's always something that I put in front of it, even though it was always there. And it gets to this point, y'all. I mean, I feel like this is with any dream that we've been given. If we don't take the steps to make it happen, what ends up happening is we almost feel like we're suffocating after a while. Like that dream, it almost like grows on you like a boulder on your chest, right? And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And you just find yourself continually unhappy doing these other things, but yet you keep spending all your time doing these other things. I always laugh. It's like choosing to sit down and binge a Netflix show versus working out. Why is it so much easier for us to sit down and binge the Netflix show? Even then, once it's done, we're like, oh, well, we feel kind of empty, or wow, I've been sitting there and I feel really sluggish now. Versus when you go and work out, you feel good, you feel energized. It's so easy for us to choose the easier thing, right? Than what is actually might be take a little bit more work, but gosh, it's so good for us. It's so good for us. So what I discovered was that my why wasn't good enough, because if it was, I would have Finished that book years ago. My first book took me 10 years to complete, y'all. 10 years. My second book took me 30 days. And there's a reason why. And that why came in the form of two very, very cute little boys. Are they on that first page? Yes, my little boys. My why came through these two. It wasn't until I had them and I was looking at them, and I call this like my triple meltdown moment. Like, it was one of those times, and if you're a parent, you've probably been here, where at the time I had my little one who was an infant, and then my oldest one who was 2, and I'm holding the infant. My 2-year-old's crying, the infant screaming, hysterical crying. I'm crying because it just feels like everything is just crashing down around you, right? Like, everyone feels hysterical. And there's this moment. It was I can remember it to this day, where it was almost this like cloud that came around me, where it was like, stop for a moment. Look at these 2 little guys. They are a reflection of you. They are acting the way they are because they are a reflection of what's going on inside of you right now. And it was that revelation of how unhappy I was because I kept doing all these other things instead of doing the thing that I felt called to do all of these years. And that was eye-opening for me because I knew more than anything, I wanted these 2 little guys to believe in themselves, to have big dreams, to know that they can reach those big dreams no matter what. But I can't tell them those things if I'm not living it myself, right? Kids don't listen if you're not actually doing the actions yourself. And so I had to be what I wanted for them. And y'all, finally, my why became big enough. It became important enough. I had postpartum depression really badly with the second one, so 10 months of it. And he wasn't sleeping. I mean, he would sleep maybe for an hour straight in a day if we were lucky. So we were barely even sleeping that much. But despite all of that, my new why, that moment in time where everything just clicked, I wrote 5 books in 10 months. Now, I don't recommend it. I don't recommend that, but I was suddenly on fire. And all of these things that I hadn't been doing for 30 years at the time, or 26 years at the time, because I was 33. Suddenly I wanted to do them. I needed to do them now because I had a brand new why behind it. So I always want to challenge that. Like, if you have this dream, is your why big enough? Is it big enough to drive you to the end of it? And if not, you need to keep digging deeper because this dream is given to you for a reason. So if you are not even rushing, but setting out, taking the action steps to complete it right away, my question for you is your why big enough? So just a few questions. Why do you want to write this book? What will drive you to complete this book? What's at stake if you don't write this book? And what's the urgency behind writing it now? My urgency comes from, I do live in this mindset of not every minute is guaranteed, right? Tomorrow's not guaranteed. The next hour's not guaranteed. The next minute's not guaranteed. So what can I choose to do today that will leave behind that legacy, that reflection to my kids, that of who I want to be, that impact I want to make in this world? And I want you to think about that with the book. So where do you start then? I think one of the biggest errors that I see a lot of authors making, first-time authors, is that they sit down to write, but they don't really know why they're writing this book. They don't really know the message of it, the point of it. Well, if you don't have the point, you don't really know where it's going, right? You don't know what you're writing in the first place, which goes back to that why that we just discussed. That all has to be connected. So you want to have a very clear theme of your book. And I call it 4 different things: theme, message, promise, outcome, because with working with hundreds of clients over the past few years, each one of these means something different to a different client, right? Again, it's what they want to latch on to that will actually help them complete the book. So whether you think of it as the theme of it, like what does this book really stand for? What is it going to represent? What's the message? What is that one message that I want to be able to deliver to every single person who reads this book? What's the promise that this book is making? What is this book promising to the reader? Or what is the ultimate outcome? How will this help someone else's life? How might this change them? So if you don't know what your theme, message, promise, outcome is, I want you to get clear on that. I want you to write the sentence in your workbook, and we also attach worksheets. So if you had a chance to either download those in the course, or we have them where you can fill them out electronically, please make sure you take notes, because this will help you as well. But write down, this book will either help, empower, inspire, motivate, encourage people to do what? What will your book do for other people? And so, you will have one main theme. If you find that your main theme has a bunch of ands attached to it, well, this book will do this and this and this and this. It's not going to hit the target as easily or as much. Okay. It has to be concise. What is that ultimate focus of your book? Every reader might get a little something different from it, right? Those are just multiple sub themes, and they can all add value. They can support the main theme. But when you're looking at like that one main theme, message, promise, or outcome, it's that consistency that, no matter who picks up your book, whatever else they might be able to get out of your book, that is the one consistent theme, message, promise, outcome. And what this does is it really serves as your guiding light through writing the book, through choosing the stories that you want to be able to write. Like we were talking about memoirs earlier. How do you know what stories from your life? Because it's your life. One of the biggest struggles with people who are writing their memoirs, they have a hard time cutting stories from their memoir because they all mean something to them. However, if those stories are not adding value or serving that theme, message, promise, outcome, they're not meant for that book. They should be saved for a different book. So that's why it's so important to identify this, because you don't want to read a book or you don't want to have your readers reading your book and they're confused because they don't even know what this book stands for, because there's so many different elements and themes all weaved in that it feels messy. Let me give you a little insight into your future here. If you're writing one book, y'all, more than likely you're going to write many more books. That's the way it works. I know a lot of people are always like, oh, let me just get through this first book. But every single client I have worked with over the past few years, they finish one book and immediately they're already moving on to the next, because it's addictive. And not only that, it's probably part of your purpose, right? So it's all linked together. So I say that because you have to remember that this is not the only book that you're going to be writing where you have to jam everything into it. You want to be smart because you want this book to truly have the impact it's meant to have. And with that comes discernment and what's included and making sure that it fits the theme. One of the biggest tips I have for writers, I don't care what it is you're writing, even if it's just, poems or your own thoughts, but especially when it comes to books, y'all, always have a separate document that is like the excess document. Okay. This is the one where you always have open as you're working on other books. And you might feel inspired as you're working on a book and, suddenly you're telling a story. Once you're done with that story or that thought or whatever it might be, you'll realize, okay, this is not a good fit for this book. Well, cut it, immediately move it into the excess document. do not ever delete things. Your words are gold. One of the biggest pains, actual physical aches that I feel is when I see people deleting the words, the sentences that they have spent hours crafting. Y'all save those. Especially in the day and age of social media, those could be like, future social media posts or stories you share in other ways. Don't hit the delete button after spending hours of crafting your words and sentences. Okay. You never know when you might use those for a different project. Here are some more questions you can ask yourself. What is the key takeaway or feeling you want the reader to walk away with once they've once they read the last page of your book? Y'all, I always think of it like when you think of someone reading your book, wouldn't the best feeling be where they like read the last page and it's like that sigh where they're kind of sad that it ended and they want to stay connected with you and they want to read like the next thing you have to read. I mean, to me, it's always that like feeling where they, like put it to their heart because it meant so much to them. So, what is that key takeaway or feeling you want the reader to walk away with once they read that last page? I always think of it in this motion. I mean, I've done this to books before, right? Like you just kind of want to keep hugging them because you don't want to let them go, even though you read the last page. What do you want the reader to achieve by reading your book? Is there something that you want them to get out there and do? If you are writing a nonfiction book, sometimes with your memoir, more than likely with inspirational self-help, thought leadership type of books, y'all, one of the biggest tips I can tell you is to make it very clear in your book with what you want the reader to do with the information. How do you want them to read the book? How do you want them to digest the information? What do you want to challenge them to do next? Be very clear in it. Because most people will just read a book, they'll go through it, they'll put it down and step away. I always tell my clients, like, hey, if you want them ideally to read one chapter a week and then journal on it or put certain things into motion, tell them that. It doesn't mean everyone will do that, but you are protecting what you're wanting to do with the impact that your book can have. So what's the best way for them to be able to process it, to read it? What do you want them to do with it? Be very clear in that. What value do you want to add to the lives of those who read your book? You guys, to me, this is like just any book, even if you write a non-fiction or a fiction book, don't you want to add some value to their life? It's not just for them to read it. What value do you want to add to their lives? Because that's your chance, which is really incredible. If you had one message to deliver to this world, what would it be? Has there been a consistent theme in your life as reflected by the events, people, circumstance, environments, and growth over the course of your journey in this world? That's a big one when you're looking at selecting a theme. A lot of times we have had our own consistent themes in our life, and it is really what's charging us to write about something specific. So you can form your theme around that. Is there something that you have a lot of knowledge, skill, talent, and passion for that you want to share with others? What is the key takeaway? And you guys, you'll get all these slides too. So you can always come back to these. Now let's talk about who's your book for. You guys hear a lot about target audiences, right? And just create like an avatar based off of who you really want this book to be for. I don't believe in that because I'm so emotionally driven and I really honor personal connections with people that I feel like that's what you need to when you're writing, because this is really to write a book that you feel like is truly a reflection of you and what you stand for, your heart, your soul. You need your target person to be someone that you have an emotional connection with. And it's going to shape how you write your book. It's going to shape what you include in your book because you're going to think about that person that you know. Like it's very clear to you who that person is, and you're going to be writing your book for them. So I want you to get as specific as possible. and thinking about someone that you have an emotional tie to. So maybe it's a niece and nephew, maybe it's a best friend, maybe it's, your grandma, your grandpa, maybe it's someone at your church, maybe it's you 20 years ago. But be very clear in who your person is. Know their face, know who they are, know what they need to hear to be able to achieve the outcome that you're trying to achieve with your book. And I always suggest that when you're writing your book, then have a picture of that person up, because they'll also be connected back to your why. Because more than likely, then you know that they need to read your book. You know that this book is going to help them. So it will drive you forward even in those times that you feel stuck. And when you feel stuck, all you have to go back to is, what else do they need to hear? And like I said, it'll really help you like shape your tone as well. Like, what is the tone of this book that would connect best with them? So please, 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 I cannot stress this enough. Think about who your target person is. And if you find that you have like 3 different people and you can't figure out like how to narrow it down to one, we've had this before with a couple of clients, then I would go back to, is your theme clear enough? Like we had one client, her book, she was like, well, this could be for patients. It could be for the patient's family. It could be for the caretakers of the patients. I'm like, well, you're looking at 3 different audiences with that. And so with the information you're trying to deliver in the book, if you're trying to reach all 3 of those people, it's going to miss the mark, because those are 3 totally different audiences, and you cannot deliver information that's going to cater to all of those audiences at once. Always remember, you're going to have a central audience, and then yes, can it impact people around that audience, central audience? Yes, but always have that clarity with your one person who reflects your target audience. How will this book be of service to them? Why do you want this person to, what do you want this person to walk away with, right, when they read the last page? And so I want you to have written down to whoever it is. Know who that person is. All right, let's talk a little bit about structuring and plotting your book now that hopefully you have a pretty clear idea of your book idea and the theme behind it. So there are many, many different structures out there, y'all. I mean, this alone could be like a day-long deep dive into structures. I'm going to talk a little bit, or I'm going to talk the most today about the 3-act structure, because it's the most common one used for fiction books and then memoir books specifically. But there's also like the 7-point story structure that we use a lot, and the hero's journey. These are probably the 3 that we use the most within our own programs and, ghostwriting books, book coaching people, all of those. We're also going to dive into the internal conflict, character development, action events, external conflict. Y'all, no matter what type of book you're writing, there's a chart of growth, of development happening right through it. So whether it's a fiction book about the main character, there's a development of that character, of the character's character happening throughout the book. If it's a memoir, you're reflecting your own growth, your own development throughout life as you experience things, right? Like we all go through these experiences, and we have the choice in everything that we go through to grow from it, to learn from it. One of my favorite quotes is, no man is a friend, no man is an enemy, every man is a teacher. And I feel like that applies to our experiences in life as well. Like if we really came at everything and just neutralized it and just thought, what am I supposed to learn from this? What was I supposed to learn from this interaction with this person? What was I supposed to learn from this experience in life? It has changed the way I approach so much. Like if I have a bad day, instead of getting down about it, now I just sit back and think, what am I supposed to learn from the events of today? What can I take away? How can I grow? How can I apply this to tomorrow? And that is our entire life journey. A lot of times we're able to do this in hindsight better, right? We can look back at our life and think, man, maybe I should have done this differently, or wow, I really learned this and grew from this. And that is what we're reflecting in our books. Even self help books, inspirational books, you got to think of it as you're helping the reader grow. It's a journey for them. You really don't want them to be the same person that they were in the beginning as what they are at the end, because you hope that there's some takeaway, something that they can apply in their life, some way that they've grown, even if it's just this much growth. So you want to be able to identify that. Again, whether fiction, memoir, self help, inspirational, it applies across the board. Where are the internal conflicts that they're struggling with? Where are the external conflicts? And how are they growing? I also have to separate it because it's really fascinating. We won't be able to dive into it here, but y'all, there's so much to be said about writing styles. And this is the biggest way that we operate in all of our programs with Burning Soul Collective. At the end, I'll give you guys two different ways. We're not selling anything truly. It's just more of like, here are two ways if you want to continue to work with us. And it's two different programs we have. One is our Soulful Author Journey program, where it's 4 months of writing your book from beginning to end, and you're getting feedback the entire way through. There's also a course that's walking you through writing, publishing, and promotion that you have lifetime access to. Y'all, in every single module in that course, I'm constantly showing you the different ways you can approach all of the things in writing. I'm not saying this is the way you should do it. I'm giving you the options based off of who you are and what works best for you. And that way, you know that if something's not working for you, you have a different option you can try. Because this was one of the biggest traps that I fell into for many, many years. And why I'm so protective now of my clients with it. It's because it's so easy for us to listen to other author experiences or to read other author books and see the way that they've done things. And then we think we have to adopt those same practices. And that's not the case. And a lot of times is why we get frustrated and just give up, because it doesn't work for us, because that's not who we are. Writing is intimate to you. It's so important for this book to be a true reflection of you, and it's honoring that. So when it comes to writing, for example, a lot of people will operate, or it's split all over the board, right? Some people will operate from the left brain. Left brain tends to gravitate more towards action. It's easier for them to focus on what is the action happening throughout this book, throughout the story that I want to tell. And that's what gets them through the writing. Other people who are more right brains tend to think about that emotional side, the character development side. They want more of the intimate, conversations. They want to know the meaning behind the book. And that is what drives them. Some people can go both ways. So I always want to encourage you that, like, when it comes down to sitting down and trying to plot out your book, what does it look like from beginning to end? Trust what's coming to you and don't think it's the wrong way to approach your book, because there's no wrong way to approach your book. The beauty about writing anything is that you can mold it to be whatever you want it to be. So it's going to be messy in the beginning, y'all. There's no such thing as a perfect first draft. Your first draft is going to be ugly and messy. There are going to be points that you hate it, you love it. And that is the first draft. That is the beauty of a first draft. Once you put out several of them, you will see them as being beautiful art, because you know what it's about to be. So I want to encourage you, and we'll talk through structuring and plotting a little bit more, but If you're thinking about your book and all that's coming to you is like, I really just keep thinking about the action, the action, the action, y'all start just writing down your action. And that's okay. That's okay. If you're just thinking about what you're learning, the lessons, the development, start there. And that's okay too. There is no wrong. The right comes in with, okay, now that you've had the action down, you know you need more of the emotional connection, the emotional depth. So then you go back in and fill in the emotional depth. And then vice versa, right? If you have the emotional depth, then you need to come in and have more of that action, the intrigue to get people turning the pages. So there's no wrong in how you start, but you make it right by filling in what you know it needs to balance it out. So like I said, we'll talk more about the 3-act structure because honestly, this is something I even use for nonfiction. Because whether you're talking about a fiction book, a memoir, even a self-help inspirational, you're still thinking about it in terms of from the reader, what's the journey that they're going through. But this is really the one that's used the most because it's pretty basic. If you got your act 1, act 2, act 3, you've got the beginnings, really introducing the book, and then you have the inciting incident, kicking things off before the rising action events, the climax, the falling action events, and then you have the conclusion. That is the summary of it. But it's just this, you build up the anticipation of what's happening, and then you come back down. Now, there are 2 areas that I really want to point out, and that's the inciting incident and the climax. These are usually the 2 areas that I will always identify or encourage people to identify first. And the reason why is that the climax really needs to be very supportive of that main theme. And a lot of times people will think of the climax as some big action event that happens. You guys, it doesn't have to be some big action packed event. It could be something as little as just a revelation, a thought, something that suddenly changed you. The point of it is really there's no going back once this has happened, right? Like now your life, the way you approach things, the way you see things has changed. There's no going back once you realize certain things, once you see certain things, once you see the importance of things, right? Or how your life needs to change. Now, it doesn't mean that things change overnight. That's not the way life works. It means that now you have seen something has happened to you that now you need to start integrating it into your life, that it is going to change because your perspective, your intentions have changed. And then the inciting incident is kind of that other point of no return in the sense of something happened where life will never be the same again. Like in that beginning setup piece, life will never be the same again after that inciting incident. And it's because of that inciting incident that eventually leads you to that climax. And it's the rising action events that all play a part. And it's one of the most fascinating parts to me about our entire life journey, how you can be making these decisions, how things can happen to you, or you're doing things that cause that pivot your life. And again, you don't see it until you reflect back on your life. And then you're able to see how all of those things played a part, led you in one direction instead of the other. But what's powerful about writing is that now we get to reflect back on that, identify those things, honor them, see how our life has changed for the better, maybe sometimes for the worse, but we're able to see it. And again, see the growth that comes out of it. So again, whether you're writing fiction, if you're writing your memoir, this is the perfect exercise. If you're writing inspirational self-help book, y'all, if you want to write a very impactful, inspirational, or self-help book, you need to weave in personal stories. So we're going to do this exercise because it will help you no matter what book you're writing. But if you don't have the personal stories, it's not going to make the change that is probably in your heart to help someone with. People have to be able to relate to what other people are doing in life, right? We have to be able to connect. That's how we connect, is on the emotions. Maybe we experience different things in life, but we can connect with how we all felt as a result. Those emotions connect us as humans. So you need to be able to provide stories, examples that people can connect with. Really dive in deep. And like I said, this exercise should be able to help you with that. So we're going to talk about, like, how do you identify what stories will serve the theme of your book? Talk about what part of your life do you want to bring into this book? This is always a big question, especially for people who are writing memoirs. How do I figure out what part of my life do I bring into this? It's not, is it the entire scope of my life? Again, it goes back to the theme. It's the stories that support the theme. Those are the stories of your life that you're bringing in. So always remember that. If this is your first book that you're writing, here's the easiest tip. The easiest way to become a storyteller is to start with the story you know best. You know your story better than anyone else. And that is why your story is the perfect foundation to start with. Pulling out stories, whatever it might be. I'm a fiction writer and a nonfiction writer. My fiction books, y'all, are fun because I still use my life stories, except they're very heavily draped in fiction, right? But they're so therapeutic for that reason, because I get to explore different elements of things that happen in my life, or I can relive even bad moments in different ways and put more of a healing twist on it. I feel like, I don't know, does anyone else do this? When I read other people's books, even if it's fiction books, I'm always like, well, especially if it's fiction books, I'm always like, I wonder what part of their life they actually took this from, you know? And sometimes too, especially with fiction, it could even be just like our fears. I write fiction sometimes just based off my worst fears because it helps get them out of my head onto paper, and like I can deal with them better. But then when you're looking at nonfiction, memoirs, the stories you bring in to inspirational self-help, y'all, it's really your chance to, how courageous do you want to be in sharing? That's the question that comes up a lot, is how much should I share? How much should I hold back? And all of that is just dependent on each individual person. But when you're writing, especially your first draft, if you're writing your memoir, if you're telling some hard stories in your, self-help inspirational book, and you just don't know if these are things you truly want to share, write them down for you. Okay. Write this first draft for you. I tell everyone this: don't start editing in advance, y'all. That's just detrimental to your writing, to your impact. If you're already filtering yourself as you're writing, you're immediately reducing the impact that your words might be able to create. Write for you first. Write in the most raw way possible for you first, knowing no one else is going to see this except you. And then edit for the world later. But do not start filtering yourself early. I do this for whatever reason with journaling. It's why I don't journal. It's because I have this idea in my head that someone's going to find my journals. And it's funny because I'm a very open book as is. My memoir is coming out this year. You'll be able to read it for yourself. I'm a very open book, but it's funny. Like, I have this, I don't know if something happened in my childhood or what, but I cannot sit down and write in a journal openly. I struggle with that. So I don't journal for that reason, because it doesn't feel authentic. For some reason, it's easier for me to sit on a computer screen in my Word document and write with an open heart. And I do that and then save one for me always. And then, like I said, edit for the world afterwards. So this is the exercise that I want you guys to spend some time with on your own because it can take a while. But honestly, if you can spend an hour doing this, it's going to give you so many great stories to be able to play off with whatever type of book you're writing. Because again, it's using the stories of your life. So I want you to start by taking just a blank sheet of paper and start with writing your theme, promise, outcome. Whatever it was that you identified in the beginning, write that at the top. Because when you know you're setting the intention, then you're setting the intention of the stories that you would like to have brought up. One thing with this exercise is that once you start, you might have some ideas, some stories that pop up today. I guarantee you throughout this week, you're going to keep thinking of things because it's like now you've opened up the box. And suddenly your mind is going to start serving you brand new stories to be able to use. So I want you to draw a horizontal line from one width to the other on your paper. And then you're going to mark the horizontal line with multiple vertical lines, just like it shows on here. And only on the top portion of it, I want you to start marking, and you can just like almost give them titles, but they're significant events of your life. So, for example, one of our clients, go ahead and do a little promo for her, Jennifer Hobbs. She wrote Calmed, and it's about her time serving in Afghanistan and a little bit leading into, before she was deployed and then afterwards how it impacted her life. Her theme of her entire book is post-traumatic growth. So taking these events, the hardships, the heartbreak, everything that she experienced, and looking at it and how do I grow from this? How am I now better able to serve other people as a result of what I went through? So it's the whole post-traumatic growth aspect that is for theme, and encouraging other people to look at, their hardships that way as well. So when it came down to significant events, that was her theme that she had in mind. And it was, what were all of these things early in my life that also played a part, as did, of course, the main, being in Afghanistan and everything that she experienced over there. And then afterwards. So you start thinking about it like that. And again, it's one of the things I'm fascinated about with life, because I feel like a lot of us, when we start to connect with our purpose here in this world, which a lot of our themes tend to play into, we start to see all of these little situations from early on in life that was almost giving us like a heads up. Hey, this is your passion. This is what you need to be doing in life. We start to see all of these little situations leading into it, or trying to make us more aware, or growing us, shaping us in different ways. So I want you to identify just what comes to your mind, the significant events that might be related to that theme that have played a part in your life. And this is something you can even do outside of your theme. It's a really powerful exercise to be able to do, because a lot of times, I always think about this as at like funerals, for example. People will stand up there and say, this person was this and this and this and this. And I'm always like, wouldn't it be amazing to know how they became that person that they were, that everyone knew them to be? Because we're not just born that way in this sense, right? Like, I mean, I know many of us can say we're not the same person today as what we were 5 years ago. We're different in a lot of ways. So what continually shapes us and helps us grow into who we are? And then on the lower part, I want you to identify on that same line the impact, the emotion that you felt as a result of that significant event. And again, significant events, just to clarify, aren't always things that happen to us. Sometimes there are things that we caused, that we created as well. So it works both ways. And what was the impact, the emotion that you felt as a result of that? And these can be, positive or negative across the board. Um, why I have a tree here, I am obsessed with trees, love trees, favorite piece of nature. Trees, I feel like, are such a reflection of who we are as humans. And there's so much more to it. There's so much more into even how trees communicate with each other that there's just so much beauty behind them. But, with a tree, all you can see is what's above the ground. And not even that, right? You can't see everything in the trunk, but the trees are constantly changing, right? They go through seasons of life like we as humans go through seasons of life. Shedding leaves, growing new ones, changing colors throughout. And no matter what, they have that trunk that's so strong, that's holding them up no matter what the weather is like, no matter what the conditions are like. But then you have all the roots, and the roots, that's what's feeding what everyone's able to see on the outside. And that's like us. People can see the outside of us, they don't know everything that's actually feeding us, fueling us inside. The roots, that's a messy uh grouping, right? I mean, it could be there's beautiful things, beautiful parts of our roots, ugly parts of our roots. But if you chop off one root, you have the risk of killing the entire tree, right? It's the same thing with us. If we discard even the ugly things in our life, we forget how even those ugly things shaped us into who we are today. And we need to honor all of it. And so those roots, that's the part I want to be able to identify in your stories. Because you can feel the difference between surface level conversations, right? These Someone could walk next to you every second of your life and tell you about all of the significant events in your life. They cannot tell you the impact, the emotion that it actually had on you. Only you know that. And it's so important to identify that. And then not only that, but as you have those significant events, if you're able to, then you might need to do a separate page, but try to put them in as chronological order as possible. What I then want you to be able to identify is the transformation. How did this change you, positive or negative? Because we all go through that. How did it shape your character? Because those are the stories that you want also reflected in your book. In that way, that character development that's being shaped. And it's not always smooth, right? There are times when we have our dips and it's this ugly character development moment, but then we rise out of there. And usually, if we were able to learn from that, our growth, our growth is what's so important to honor. So what I would like you to do after this workshop, or, hopefully this week, you guys can spend an hour doing this. Identify at least 10 to 15 significant events or stories that support your theme, your promise, your outcome of your book. And take the time to mark the actual impact, the emotion, because again, those are our connection pieces. Even if our stories differ in details because we are all going through different things, we can connect on the emotions. And that's what you want to be able to bring into what you're writing. So going back to like the 3-act structure, this is how I approach it, just so you guys can use it when you're trying to figure out how this might work for like your memoir or your fiction books. I always start with the main climax of the story, since again, like we talked about earlier, it'll tie into the theme of the book. and it's kind of that point of no return. And then I go back to the inciting incident. What happened that led me on this path all of a sudden to where this climax happens? And then I go into the beginning introduction, which is what life was like before the inciting incident. And then I have the rising action events in between, and then the end of the book conclusion and the declining action. Time and time again, as I've worked with clients, hands down, this is the best way to approach something like the 3-act structure. So again, these will be in your slides that you can apply later, but cannot recommend this process enough when you're trying to identify stories that will work. And then this is just showing you the actual order of how they flow versus the order that I suggest you identify them in. As far as other ways to write your book outside of the 3-act structure, I call this the A through Z method. Sorry, I want to clear my throat. I know it's starting to get out a little bit. Hopefully you guys can still hear me really well. This is a really powerful technique when you're just thinking about, okay, going back to how do I want someone to walk away from this book, like when they read the last page? What do I want them to feel, to know? Start with that Z and then go all the way back to A. Where are they at the beginning of reading this book? So that's your entire path then, right? You know where they are in the beginning. Think about your target person that we identified and where you want to take them at the end of this journey / reading your book. That's why it's so important to know your message, theme, outcome, promise. So then you need to identify what are the steps, the information, the bits that they need to know or to successfully take them from point A to point Z. Identify those. And you do want to think about it in terms of, is there something that they need to know about before they can fully then get this concept, right? Later. So you want to organize it in that way. Y'all, and sometimes it's important to even say, before they can fully understand this concept, are there limiting beliefs that we need to cut down? Are there things that we need to help them release before they can add these other things to their life? Why your target person will help you so much with that. So then this is like a way that a lot of our like inspirational books tend to be shaped. You know, you really want to look at things as like more than likely you're always going to have an introduction, a conclusion. This is your chance to really connect with the reader, help them see that you understand where they are in life. Like you are meeting them there, setting them up with why you wrote this book. Why is it so passionate, or why is it such a passionate topic for you? So they understand where you're coming from. And really, a lot of times it's that place of like, care. This is what I want for you. Like, because I've seen this and this and this, and I want you to avoid this. So I want to help you with this. Like, so it's really setting it up. Many times you might have 3 different parts. Like I use this theme from one of our clients, rediscovering your true self was the theme. Part 1, she had that simpler times and limiting beliefs as being the theme of that part. So it was, how do we identify how we were raised with all of these limiting beliefs from the first place? Like we have to see that this is how these beliefs became a part of who we are today, and that they're still affecting us. Part 2 then was about finding a voice for others, and she's using her own life, like how she started finally breaking through those limiting beliefs because she had a new why, and it was to advocate for people she really loved in her life. So suddenly she had to use her voice in ways she wasn't challenged to do before. And then part 3 was really about standing in her power again. And what is she implementing in her life? What are the things that she's still struggling with that she's learning how to let go of to stand in the power? What is the impact that it's having on her life? So, you know, this easily could have been a 3-act structure uh, for this, but it worked better because we were able to think of it in terms of like part one. Where are they in the beginning? Where do we want them at the end of part one in order to be successful in part two? Okay, part two, where are they at now? Where do they need to be at the end? And then you're breaking down those steps. Same way with each chapter in between. You're thinking, where are they at in the beginning of this chapter? Where do they need to be at the end? And you're identifying the points, the subpoints that will help them be successful by the end of that chapter. Y'all, when you are plotting, and if we don't have them in here, I'm gonna ask Allison to put them into the workshop. We have some really great nonfiction and fiction outlines. I'm gonna put them in the workshop. So when we upload this recording, we'll also put them in there. Y'all, this will help you get the outlines that we've created. They're like, oh gosh, like 40 pages, but they're going to help you get as specific as possible with your book so that you can just have it and get ready to start writing because you have identified every piece that you want included in your book. You have identified that they do relate to the theme, that they're not needed for a second book, right? That they are actually associated with this one. So I will make sure I'm going to make a note for myself and remember to include those in there. Okay. Let's see here. I know we're running up on time a little bit here too. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but remember that every good story shows the character developing over the journey of a book. Whether it's a main character in a fiction book or a memoir, or if it's the reader or even yourself as the author showing up in the nonfiction. You want to feel like there's development, there's growth happening. And every page gets turned when we are able to truly understand, relate, and connect with the internal motivations that drive those characters forward and allows us to empathize with the conflicts that stand in their way from getting what they set out to achieve or becoming who they're meant to become. There's a universal story in life, right? It's what every book is basically based on. It's what we connect with as humans. It's what we're living. And that's really all you're doing in your stories. I mean, to truly be able to write a book that makes an impact, you want to connect with the universal story of life that we are all living. It is that simple, y'all. I say it's simple. I know it's a little harder when you sit down and write it, but that is at the core. And it's so important for that reason. Another little tip for you: find a community of writers who you can brainstorm with. We have one, for the record, the Soul Writer Society, but at the same time, even if it's not ours, a good friend that writes, I mean, I don't care, but whoever it is, but when you have another writer who is trying to achieve the exact same thing, who understands the importance of reflecting that in your writing, that's when the brainstorming sessions are incredibly powerful because you both understand the core element of it. Okay, so let's talk about how are you going to get your book done? And this goes back to having that why that's big enough that's going to drive you. But you also need to have clearly defined goals with an action plan in place. I mean, the book doesn't get out into the world if you're not writing it. It's as simple as that. You have to write, even in those times that you don't want to. I've had writing sessions where I'm like pounding the keys because I do not want to be writing. But y'all, because I'm emotional during that time, some of my best writing comes out of that. So don't discount even sometimes having to sit down and just be like, oh, I committed to this. I have to do this. Sometimes some really good gold can come out of that. So you must have that clear why in mind to drive you. It's going to be the only thing that helps you complete the manuscript and complete it in a way that feels authentic to you. I cannot stress enough that if you are rushing through it just to get it done, sometimes we do that just to achieve those goals, but then you want to go back and add in the layers. Make sure that this is truly reflective of you and that message that you want to share. You do not want to shortchange yourself. or your first book for that matter. And then really think like, how can I reframe those times that I'm struggling to write? Instead of saying I have to write, what will help you see it as I get to write. I get to write. I get to share the story. I have the opportunity now to share this message with thousands, millions of people. Because it's a gift to be able to sit down and write something that you know has the potential to change lives. I mean, y'all, there is so much power in that. And in the times that we feel powerless, in the times that we feel like we cannot make the changes that we want to make, y'all, writing gives us those tools, the ability, the opportunity to do that. So let's talk about some goal setting techniques. Again, this is about what works for you. If something doesn't work as you're trying it, try something else. But when we are looking at building out timelines for you to help you achieve your writing goals, these are a couple different ways we look at either chapter by chapter. So by now you would have your full outline, you know, your chapters, you know, everything that you need included in there. Yeah, so some of our authors will tackle one chapter per week. When you are setting this goal, it is important to be clear with what your weeks are. So, for example, I always tend to use the Monday through Sunday as my goal week. And the reason why is this: I will try to write in the evenings after the kids go to bed, Monday through Friday. If something comes up, if I get sick, if something happens, it leaves me Saturday and Sunday to catch up on my goal. So that's why I have my writing weeks. Any goals I set for like a week like that, my weeks are Monday through Sunday. So that gives me until Sunday night at midnight to fully catch up for my goal for that week. Whatever works for you. I had one client, she really needed the Tuesday through Monday week for her because of how she operated in her business. It's about what works for you. Word count. I mentioned that my first book took me 10 years to write. My second book took me 30 days. Word count is what drove me on this one. I knew the estimated word count for the book I was writing, which needed to be between 80 to 100,000 words. So I was aiming for 90,000. I knew I had 30 days I wanted to write. So I did the 90 divide by 30. And that was my word count goal every single day. No matter what, I would make sure I would reach that goal. And that is what drove me to write it that fast, because I had a very specific plan. I knew exactly what I was going to be working on each one of those days. And I knew I had a word count goal to reach each one of those days. Reverse word count is another way that people do it. And this is just, again, what motivates you. For me, it helped to see, you know, one day was 5,000. The next day I wrote 10,000. The next day, 15,000. I mean, that's a little high, but you know what I mean? For some people, it helps to reverse it. So so maybe they start at 80,000 words, and then on day one, they write 3,000. Well, now they know they have 77,000 words left. The next day it's, 74,000 words. So they're motivated by what's remaining versus, adding up what you're writing each day. Pay attention to what drives you. Time spent is another way that people do it. This isn't my favorite because I don't feel like it's very measurable. But if all you can dedicate to your writing is 30 minutes per day, by all means, that's a goal. What I don't like is that it doesn't really give any sort of clarity to how far in your book you're going to progress each time you sit down to write. So I'm not a big fan of that. However, for the people who just feel so overwhelmed and they're just trying to make writing more of a priority, figure out how much time you're going to spend every day. As long as you're making progress, that is what counts. Other people will set goals by story events. So again, going back to like that exercise we did with identifying the stories or plugging them into a 3-act structure. They'll sit down and they'll be like, okay, I am going to write out this story today, this story tomorrow, this story the next day. And that is what works. So they have a very specific timeline of when they will be tackling each of the stories. Pick what works for you. And if something is not keeping you motivated, it's not making you feel rewarded when you have achieved that, try a different method. Sometimes we just need to mix it up. I'll usually do either the chapter by chapter or word count one, depending on what I'm writing, depending on the season in my life, because sometimes something else motivates me more than something else does, and that's all okay. Here are some examples of what your timeline might look like. So August 7th, chapter 1 completed, August 8th through 9, review and make initial chapters on chapter or initial edits. Then you have like that whole next week to write and complete chapter 2. So these are just examples of how you can build out your own timeline. These are some time management techniques. These are ones that maybe people just don't think about implementing. I always say, we're not going to go over all of these. You guys will have this list, but I always say to have 3 of these in place for your plans, because it allows you to take ownership of your time instead of constantly going, where did all my time go? I don't have time. How did I lose an entire week? Having at least 3 of these in place will make you feel like you're taking back control of your time and helping you reach your goals when it comes to writing this book. My favorite one that I implement is the power of 3 goals per day. So number 9 there, which 9 is my favorite number, so that's pretty perfect. The power of 3 goals per day. Every single day, I have 3 things that I have to achieve no matter what. 1 or 2 is usually always related to writing. 1 is usually exercise related or maybe something related to the kids. No matter what, before I allow myself anything else, such as I love to read, I will not allow myself to read until I have achieved those 3 goals. I will not allow myself to sometimes even eat ice cream or have a dessert, right? Until all 3 of those goals are achieved. And it just keeps me motivated. And it lets me know that when I wake up in the morning, those are the 3 things I need to do for myself. Not always for other people, right? It's also for yourself. The things that you need to do. Because it's so easy for us to be motivated by things we need to do for other people that we forget about the things we need to do for ourselves. And writing, honestly, in the very beginning, it's going to feel very much for you. And that's what a lot of people struggle with finding the motivation to it, because it just feels like it's time that they're taking away from their family or, from doing other things. Y'all, it's just as important, because again, if it's connected with your purpose, it's not just about you living out that purpose. It's about how that purpose is going to help other people. So there's so much more to it. Do not feel like it's a selfish time. Yeah, I'll give you guys one more insight. The Post-it technique one is one that's very effective for a lot of my clients. They will take a new month, say January. They'll have Post-its on their wall where each Post-it is a day of the month. So 1 through 31. And then on each of those days, they'll have a different goal to reach with their writing. So for example, for those who like the word count, maybe it's 500 words on January 1st, maybe it's 1500 words on January 3rd, like whatever it might be. They cannot take off the Post-it until that goal is done. And so when they're able to throw one away, it feels like rewarding, right? It's like, yes, I got that done. It feels good. I've made progress. When they're missing goals, it drives them nuts to see it. And so usually what they'll do too is, like, say if one day is 1,000 words, one day is 500, they miss the 500 word day. They'll make sure that they make up for that on another day so they can throw away the Post-it. So it's when you have something tangible like that too, it helps. So those are my 2 favorite, but here are some other ones you can implement. Like I said, try to have 3. So here's how to actually put the writing plan in motion. Choose a specific goal setting technique to begin with and chart out a timeline using your structure to identify the milestones to achieve on certain days. Remember, the more specific, the more effective you can be. a lot of people will waste time when they finally have that time to write, thinking about, okay, what should I write? What should I do now? Oh, let me go back and read whatever. Oh, now my time's up and I haven't written. It's so important to know what you're going to write. Because then, for example, if you're writing at night, you can spend all day kind of thinking about, okay, I know tonight that I am working on rising action event number one. What does that look like? Maybe you can take your phone, you can, make different notes when you need to, as you think about ideas. And then you're ready. If you only have 30 minutes carved out, then you can sit down and because you've been thinking about it all day as is. So the more specific you can be with your outline and your plans to write, the more effective you're going to be. And then choose at least 3 time management techniques to implement or have ready to go. And remember, your book cannot make an impact if it's still stuck in your head or your mind or on your computer. The only way it's going to be able to do those things that it has the chance to do is by putting them out into the world. So, on that note, let's dive into a high level view of publishing. There are 3 types of publishing routes, okay? There's the traditional publishing route, the self-publishing route, and the hybrid publishing route. Traditional is the one that's been around forever. It's the original. You've got, the publishing houses, especially the big publishing houses. Now you have like different small press publishers, but so what happens with traditional publishing is that unless they have open solicitations, which a lot of them don't, you usually have to go through a lit agent, a literary agent, to have them sell your book then to a traditional publishing house. So it's a process because, then you have to research lit agents, try to find one that you feel like would truly represent you. They also have to be open to queries at the time. You have to write a query letter, synopsis, pitch. Each one varies a little bit. So you really have to get to know who the lit agent is, look at different books that they've represented before, and then look specifically at what they are requesting. And then you submit to them. And then sometimes they'll either pass, they'll ask for like a partial manuscript, or they'll ask for your full manuscript. And then, they'll review it. And if they feel like it's one that they can work with, then they'll sign you. And then their next job is to try to sell you to a traditional publishing house. We'll talk about pros and cons to this in a bit. Sorry, my voice is officially getting ready to go, but self-publishing is when you do it all yourself. So traditional publishing, there's a team, right? There's a team who will take your manuscript and will do the cover design and interior formatting, get everything all set up, ready to go for you. Self-publishing, you're doing it all yourself. You're taking control of everything. Now, you might hire still people to do things for you. Like, for example, your cover design, maybe you hire someone who does that. Or you hire people who can help you build a launch team, whatever it might be, but you're in control. It's almost like you're running a little business for a little bit with your self-publishing. Because, side note, you guys, this author path should be considered as a business. I know it's not as romantic as what a lot of people want to be able to believe with being an author, but if you want to do it the right way, you need to look at it as a business. And there's a lot that goes into that, even with like having separate business accounts for it. But so important if you want it to be successful and you're not just looking at it as a hobby, like you want to take great care of it. Self-publishing got a bad reputation years ago when it was first launched. Like suddenly, there were no gatekeepers. Like anyone could publish a book on Amazon, for example. And now you can pretty much publish a book anywhere. But so a lot of people took advantage of that. They hurried up and put together books that didn't look good. They weren't properly edited, so they were messy. They, just a mess through and through. So self-publishing in the very beginning got a very bad reputation for that reason. Then people started realizing, oh, if I actually want to take this seriously and compete with traditionally published books, I need to make this professional. So they started investing in professional editors to have your book be top notch. Side note with that, there are 4 different types of editing: developmental, line, line copy, and proofreading. If you go the self-publishing route, even if you go the traditional publishing route, y'all, I cannot suggest this enough. Best investment you can make for your book, because it's not a cost, it's an investment for this book to be the best book it can be. If you want to stand out with traditional publishers, have your book edited before you even start sending it to traditional publishing, because they get tons of queries every single day. And if they're messy, they just look like a lot to work with, they're going to pass. If your book is in top-notch shape, you have a better chance. Developmental edits are going to help really enhance your book. Line edits will be the flows, the language, all of that. And the proofreading is, of course, polishing everything off. Cannot recommend those investments enough, but especially when you're self-publishing. Same thing with, they started doing professional covers that actually match the market. Y'all, you cannot tell the difference today between many self-published books and traditional published books for that reason. I've got multiple author friends who are making millions of dollars from self-publishing because they're doing it the right way. They're treating it as it should be. And not to say that everyone's making it. It's a hard route, right? Because you're doing everything. But man, the reward can be there for those who are willing to do it. Hybrid publishing is a mix between traditional and self-publishing. It's what a lot of small press publishers are, Burning Soul Press being one of those. And what it is really serving as a partner to the author and helping them do all of these things so they don't have to do it themselves. So you're bridging that expertise, people who know the market, because more than likely they probably represent very specific genres, like we represent memoir, self-help, and inspirational with Burning Soul Press. So we study the market. We're always looking for trends and what's out there. We always want to make sure that the author's keywords and everything are optimized, right? So we're doing all of that. You're going to hear things about vanity presses versus hybrid. There's a difference, and this gets intermingled a lot. Hybrid publishing, like I said, is truly those who are a bridge between self-publishing and traditional publishing. They're not just publishing your book and being done with it. They're also helping in some way ensure that your book is reaching the goals with getting into the hands of readers. Guess what, you guys? If you just publish your book, it doesn't mean people are going to find it, right? I think there's something like 3,000 books that get published to Amazon every single day. You have to be smart in how you get your book out there. There's strategies, there's methods. You have to be willing to get visible. That is one of the biggest myths that a lot of people have. Original traditional publishing, back in the day, they will help you with marketing. Anymore, when you query, they will ask you like what your social media following is or what your marketing plan is, because they don't want to take it all on themselves anymore. As an author, you have to be willing to get visible with your book, no matter what path you take. I just want to make that very clear up front. And I'm an introvert, y'all, through and through. Talking even like this one-on-one, I love, but doing group stuff, not my thing. Becoming very visible, not always my thing. What has made it my thing is that I latch on to my message, my purpose every single time. That is what gets me out here doing it, even though it's not my preference to do it. Same thing with your books. When you are latched onto your message and your purpose, and you know that your message needs to get out to as many people as possible, it becomes a totally different ballgame at that point. You have to be willing to lean into that, let go of anything with your ego or your shyness or anything like that. And remember that it's all to serve a bigger purpose. And again, I can relate because I know how it feels, but man, it's worth it on the other side. So back to hybrid and vanity. The other thing with hybrid versus vanity, Vanity, you'll see in their contracts a lot of times, not only are they just like publishing your book and they're done, there's no author support. A lot of times they are not only asking you for payment up front, but they are also taking a percentage of your royalties. So basically, you're being left with hardly anything. So you have to watch out for that. Most small press publishers like me, we are author funded, meaning the author pays up front because we are providing them with services, publishing, marketing, PR, education support, all of that. But we're not taking royalties because that's part of what we're doing as authors. Like, we want you guys to have all your royalties because it's not fair for someone to take the length of those for, contract, or for the length of a contract or life. There's a lot to it. I know. Let's dive into pros and cons with it. So when you're deciding, like, what is the right path for me? Should I choose traditional? Should I choose self-publishing? Should I choose hybrid? Here are the biggest factors. But number one, it still goes back to, what is your vision for this book? What are your goals for this book? And how will they be achieved? So, for example, let me take this bookstore one here. If your vision is to see your book in bookstores, that is like number one on your list. That is your highest value, your highest priority. Traditional publishing is going to be your best bet because traditional publishers have the contacts, the salespeople, the distribution lines already set up in bookstores. They already have those relationships where bookstores are willing to carve out a section on their shelf for the books brought in from traditional publishers. Can you do it self-publishing? Can you do it hybrid publishing? Yes, but it's more of a grassroots effort. It takes longer time. So that's just something to think about with that. Control. Do you want all of the rights to your book? Do you want to be able to control what happens? We have some people who are like, honestly, part of my vision is to have this be a Netflix documentary someday or series someday. Well, that's part of why we structure ours like 100% rights remain the author, because if you have your rights anywhere else, striking deals like that are part of your vision becomes more complicated because then the publishing agency is a part of that too. They're set up as potentially getting part of the profits from that. Y'all, your vision needs to be your vision. I can't stress that enough. So the more control you have over your book, the better in that realm. Your team, you get to choose your team as a self-publisher and a hybrid publisher. You don't get to choose it with traditional publishing. Pros and cons. Traditional publishing, they've been through it time and time again, right? You are working with professionals who know the market. Pros and cons to that. I mean, I have several traditionally published friends who like a couple, I would say 3/4 of them actually are choosing to no longer do traditional because your book gets edited by a publishing house too, right? So sometimes there are times when it no longer feels like your own because it's been made into what they know will sell the best. Again, pros and cons to that. It depends on what your goals are, your values are with this book path. Your team, so you get to choose that with self-publishing. Hybrid publisher, you can interview small presses and find out who will be supporting your book. Do they get your vision? Do they understand what you want to do with it? That's the biggest part. Self-publishing, you're either doing it yourself or you're building your own team with that. It's possible. Time, traditional publishing, expect anywhere from 1 to 3 years before your book is actually released into the world. And again, you got to think about that as like the time spent to find a lit agent, the time spent for them to edit your book, the time spent then for them to sell your book, the time for it to then go through the process with the traditional publisher. 1 to 3 years typically. Self-publishing, hybrid publishing could be in, it could be next week technically. Don't recommend that because there are processes that we highly recommend for your book to be the best that it can be before it's out into the world. Because again, you guys want to do this right, right? It's a reflection of you and what you stand for. So a lot of people get really, in this urgency mindset, but you still want to be able to do it right. So you're balancing that. Most of our clients will put out their book between 4 to 8 months. If everything can stay on track, it's usually enough time to really get it out there. But there are also things you want to weigh, like, do you want to pre-sell? Do you not want to pre-sell? Lots of different elements in there that might affect the time. Royalties, traditional publishing, they take 85% of your royalties for life. Net royalties, just for those of you who don't know, your book's set at a retail price. Your royalties are what's left over after printing costs, because it costs money to book or to print your book, of course. Any related shipping costs to the customers, and then also distributor cost. So like Amazon, if you publish through Amazon, they'll take 40% for being the ones that are just like they're getting your book out there, right? You're using their platform to distribute it. Same thing with any of the other distributors. Self-publishing, 100% net royalties. You get all of that. Let me go back to the net royalties too. So the remaining cost, traditional, they're taking 85% of what's left of that. Self-publishing, and like I said, most hybrid, if it's set up this way, you're getting 100% of the net royalties. So say if net royalties is $5 per book, you're getting $5 per book. Traditional publishing, they would get 85% of the net royalties. So big difference, right? Again, you're weighing what you're getting out of it with what you want in the end. And then prestige, because a lot of people who are able to get a deal with a publishing house, it's exciting. It's exciting to say that they were published by, especially if it was one of the like top 5 publishing companies. So again, if that's important to you, nothing wrong with it. It's just choosing what's important, having your list of values, and deciding from there. All right. So once you've written your book, then what? I already shared earlier that it is up to you as the author. No one is going to sell your book better than you. There's so many different ways you can do this, like speaking on podcasts. Podcasts are huge. Every single time I do a podcast interview, I end up with something like a book sale or, a new lead, whatever it might be. You can write as a guest on blogs. You can submit written pieces to online and local media. You can speak at conferences and events, partner with organizations, brands, fellow authors. You can work with bookstores to hold those events. Securing reviews are huge, because the more reviews your book has, the more, it's validated, right, by other people, and people are more likely to buy your book. These are all things, you guys, that we educate on, again, in our program, Self Author Journey program. But then also, if you did choose Burning Soul Press as your publisher, we educate our authors on this too, because it's all about how can you collaborate with other opportunities, with other people, to get your message out into the world. But what is going to get your message out more than anything else as an author is writing your next book. Very rarely is the first book the ultimate success, right? Usually it takes several other books for it to, for you to really build your fan base, for people to really know who you are, what you stand for. And you have to remember that. There's a social media post going around. I wish I screenshot it, but it's like the number of books it took for each author to make it big. And it was fascinating, because very rarely, again, is it that first book. Usually it's book, 3, 5, 6, whatever it might be. All that to say is to not give up. That's why it's so important to lean into what is getting you excited about your book. You have to be excited about it before you expect anyone else to be excited. That is the biggest mistake I made when I first did my author career. I barely promoted anything, because I was not ashamed, but like embarrassed. Like I was so introverted with it. And it was always easier than when I started working with other people, seeing how they would like hide. I was like, no, you got to get out there. This is great. This is good. So-and-so needs to hear your book. So-and-so needs to read. Like I would always know people who needed their book. And so it's always easier for me to cheer on other people. And then I was like, oh, light bulb, I need to do that too. Because I believe in what I've written. I believe in the stories that I want to share. I believe in the message that I know is going to help other people. You have to lean into that. And good tip here as we end. Remember, you're going to have insecurities throughout this process. It doesn't mean you're not meant to be an author. It just means you're on track to becoming one. You guys, I mean, I see consistent points in every single client I work with. Like one of the big ones is getting started. It's always the first 15%. That's the hardest for them. And then they find their flow. They're going, they're going, they're going. The other big piece where people are like, "Oh, what am I doing?" is 85%. They're getting close to being done. And now they're having this imposter syndrome just take over them. Like, who am I to write this book? Why? Like, no one's going to want to listen to me. And the other part comes right before your book's released because it's like, oh my gosh, this is going to get out into the world. What if I start getting bad reviews? What are they going to say about my book? Y'all, these are normal patterns of being an author because you're doing something big. You're stepping outside of your comfort zone. Growth doesn't happen in your comfort zone, right? It comes from outside. So you're going to have insecurities throughout this entire process. This is why I cannot stress enough. Please, 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 in some way, have accountability to your writing from someone else who knows what it's like, who says that you are not alone in this. This is normal. Just keep working through it. Just keep battling through it. Like, get to the other side of this because it's worth it. Gosh, you guys, it is so worth it. So just know if that comes up, just remember, okay, this is normal. This is normal. Everyone experiences this. Even the greatest writers still go through it, even 5, 6 books down the road. It's all part of it. So what's next? I've already said this. Write your book, write your book, write your book. Your book cannot do anything if it's still up here or on your computer, y'all. Just keep pressing through. Like I said, my point here today is to not sell anything. It's to give you guys just some opportunities if you want to come join our world, ways we can help. We have 2 primary programs, our writing community and our Soulful Author Journey program. Our writing community is really just a great way to get plugged in with other writers. We just launched this, so we're just now growing it. And we have the goal for it to be pretty big this year. This is my primary focus this year. And it's really just, we want to be able to help you with, if I even carved out 10 minutes per day of my writing, as this goes in, but if I carve out 10 minutes a day of my writing, how much of a better writer could I be day after day after day? And it's that consistency. It's the habits that make you a better writer and start to own being a writer as part of your identity. It's no longer just a hobby, but it's like, yeah, I'm a writer because I spend 10 minutes every day carved out for my craft to grow and to get better. We've got great challenges in there to keep you engaged. Also do a lot of tips, worksheets, workbooks, things that might help you guys, things that I tend to like experience with my one-on-one clients. And I'm like, oh, this will be really good for everyone else to learn about. Like we just had a question pop up about audiobooks. So I'm going to do an audiobook training for the group so they can learn about how do you create an audiobook or, what's the back end. We also have our Soulful Author Journey program. This is a very intimate group. We only allow 6 people in it. We actually have our next one kicking off January 24th. But in this program, it's really the focus is writing your book in that 4 months. And we only allow 6 people because we're doing things like every week, peer review on what you're writing. We're workshopping your outline, your structure. We're giving you feedback. Allison, who's our senior editor, she's the other one in there. So I'm helping coach on like the structure, the developmental side. She's coming in and coaching on, the line, the flow element of it. So you're always getting that professional feedback. And like I said, we just closed up our last cohort and all of them are set to publish this year, which is really exciting. There's just something that changes when you have that intimate group and that accountability to show up week after week after week, and you're still learning about writing. But then also in this course, this is the one I was telling you that you also get the publishing breakdown, like the self-publishing. You get the promotions breakdown. So you're supported even after the program has ended because you have all of these resources you can turn to time and time again. So you guys can check out all of our programs, burningsoulcollective.com. Be sure, if you haven't yet, sign up for our newsletter to learn when we're doing new events like this. I love doing these things, y'all. This is what, again, my purpose is here in this world, despite my voice going out. Thank you for putting up with it today. I really appreciate it. And then what I'll do is if you guys have any questions, I'll go ahead and open it up for any questions.